Hey there, Pro Church Media community, this is Jason again. In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at creative typography inside of After Effects. Super fun, super easy, super cool, all the supers, no third-party plugins required, but really easy to pull off and really powerful, especially when used in conjunction with pre-comps, so let's get right to it. Alright, this tutorial was prompted by a post in the Pro Church Media community Instagram, where we have this text here with this kind of spotlight going on inside of the bounds of the text. And so this is actually a pretty easy effect to pull off inside of After Effects, and you can use it for tons of different things, not just this. So let's see what we can do with this. Okay, so we're here in After Effects, and let's go ahead and create a new composition. I'm just going to do 1920 by 1920, 10 seconds long, and I'll just call this Rise Up. Hit OK. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is just get my text in there, so I'm going to grab the text tool with Command T, and then I think I'm going to use Proxima Nova Black. You can get Proxima Nova on Typekit if you're a Creative Cloud subscriber, which I guess if you're using the newest version of After Effects, you probably are, so you have Typekit, and so go ahead and sync up Proxima Nova Black because it's really awesome. And so I'm just going to type in here and just say Rise, and just kind of commit that change and maybe move it around like maybe about right there, and then just duplicate it with Command D, pull it down, and then type in up. And I think I want this to basically be, I want the up to be bigger, but I also want it to fill the same space as Rise. So I'm just going to move this anchor point right here, and then just start scaling it up over here so that P hits the edge of that E. Something like that will work great, and then just pull it down. Now I'm going to pull up the proportional grid, just select both of these, and then just kind of get this lined up right there in the center. I think something like that will work pretty well. You could also use the align tools if you want to, but I think that's going to work pretty well. We'll turn that off again. Okay, so in my original example, I also had some outlines on this, and so we'll get to that here in a second, but let's go ahead and create the kind of moving almost light leaks going on inside of this. We're just going to use the fractal noise effect, and so it's all going to be generated inside of After Effects, but we're also going to be using pre-comps for this, so you can really put whatever you want into those pre-comps, and you can basically just replace whatever you want inside of those pre-comps, and the effect will carry over, so it's super powerful and extensible. Alright, so up here in the project panel, let's go ahead and just hit the new composition button, and you can also hit Command N to do that. And again, we're going to make it 1920 by 1920, 10 seconds long. I'm just going to call this base 3 since I already have a base 1 and 2, but you can use whatever naming convention you want. Hit OK, and then I'm just going to, well, we'll leave that as is for right now. So let's go ahead and pull that down into the Rise Up composition. We'll just put it down there, and then let's go into it. And we need to get a new solid with Command Y. And just make sure it's the comp size. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it fractal, and hit OK. Okay, so now we're going to go up to Effect, scroll down to Noise and Grain, and choose Fractal Noise, which is going to be your greatest friend if you like to make motion backgrounds and things like that, because there's tons of different effects you can do with fractal noise. So let's go to Fractal Type. Let's change it to, let's try Smeary. And then we're going to go to the complexity and just pull it down probably to about 1 or so. And then let's bump up the scale on this or so. Maybe pull the brightness down. We basically want some very indistinct blobs going on here. So I'm just going to kind of mess around with these settings until I get what I want. I might go ahead and unlink the uniform scaling. So maybe I can make it wider, make it a lot taller, so I get these more streaky type effects, something like that. And I think that's looking pretty good. And if you want to test it out, you can, change up the rotation, just see what it looks like. I don't know if I like that, but evolution, that's probably what I'm going to be working with. And so I might just make it a bit wider. You want it a little sparser, something like that. You can invert it to see what happens. I think I want this. Okay, so now that we have that, I think that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and for the evolution, let's set a keyframe at the very beginning. And now we'll go all the way to the end. And well, actually I'm going to make sure this is 0 and 0, just to make it easier, because we want to make this loop, so we'll go all the way to the end. And now we're going to set this to say 4. So this is the rotation, this is the revolution, so we want to make 4 complete revolutions. And then for evolution options, just make sure cycles evolution is selected. And then hit U on your keyboard to pull up the keyframes. Then just click and just drag this 1 frame past that marker. And this will make sure it seamlessly loops, and you can see that's exactly what's happening. I think that's looking pretty good. I might scale the height up a bit more. Yeah, I think I kind of like that. Okay, so now let's do a bit of colorization to this. So let's go up to Effect, make sure this is selected, go up to Effect, scroll down to Generate, and then choose 4 Color Gradient. I'm going to set the blending mode to probably soft light. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I'm just going to do some pinks and purples here, just to kind of give it an interesting look. That green's probably not going to work too well. Maybe do more like a kind of soft blue there. Maybe change this one to more of a purplish color. And I think I kind of like that. And so you can see we have a very interesting colorization going on here. You could, of course, animate these if you wanted to, but I think for right now I'm just going to leave it as is. All right, okay, so now let's go back to the Rise Up pre-comp, and I'm going to be using these as track mats for my bases. So let's start with Up. I'm just going to move this right below Up and change the track mat to Alpha Mat, and you can see now it's only revealed within that text layer, and so that's pretty cool. If you don't see these controls, you can change up these little toggles right here, and you'll get them all. It'll be this one right here, and so just make sure you have track mat selected, and just change it to Alpha Mat, and then it'll use the layer directly above it as the track mat. And so we're getting the effect that we want, and I think it looks pretty cool, and so I like that. Let's go ahead and go up to the project panel, click on base 3 or whatever you called it, duplicate it with Command D, and then we'll go ahead and go into that. And for this one, I think we can use basically the same animation and stuff. So I'm just going to go and change it up just a bit by going to Transform, maybe change up the rotation, then come down to the evolution options, and then just change up the random seed. So now they'll basically have the same kind of feel, but they'll be different, so they won't look exactly the same, which is basically what I want. Okay, let's go back to our Rise Up composition. And I'm just going to duplicate this base 3, and I'm going to grab base 4 from the project panel, hold alternate, and drag it right over that, and it'll replace it. And now I just have to put that down below Rise, and we should get the same effect. It might not turn this off, so just make sure you toggle that off. And now we should be getting the same effect for the Rise, which looks pretty cool. And I might actually move these around a little bit, maybe even scale them down. And I can rotate them by hitting W and pulling up the rotation tool. And then I might do the same thing with this one right here. Maybe scale it down just a bit. Again, pull up the rotation tool with W, rotate it maybe the other way. You can see we have kind of an interesting effect going on here, and I think I kind of like it. Okay, so right now it's a little bit harsh, and I think what we can do is maybe change up the background just to help this out a bit. So let's grab a shape layer up here, just go up to the rectangle tool right here. You can also hit Q on your keyboard to pull it up. And then just come up to the very top and just draw a rectangle. Doesn't matter right now what color it is. Pull it all the way to the bottom. Now go up to this color well, and I'm just gonna choose, maybe kind of like a really dark purple, something like that. And we'll try that. Okay, so that's helping a little bit, but I really want these blacks inside of these letters to go away. So we're going to do something called unmult, which is an effect that basically blends out the blacks. And so for the base 4 or base 3, I'm just going to click on one of them. Then I'm going to go to my effects and presets. If you don't see this over here, just go up to Window and then scroll down to Effects and Presets, and that should pull up that panel. And then just come right here to the search bar and then just type unmult, UNMULT, and you should see this one right here. So just double click that. It's going to apply it, and now you can see that it's removing that color from this image. And so we're getting more of the look that we want. I kind of like that, so it's looking pretty good. And I might go ahead and just copy both of these, just do Command A to select both of them, Command C to copy, click on your other pre-comp, and then Command V to paste it in there, and we're getting that same look. All right, so these edges I think are a little bit too harsh, so we can fix that. I'm gonna go into Base 3 and click on my fractal and go up to the fractal noise. And for this overflow, instead of allowing HDR results, I'm gonna change it to soft clamp. That should soften things up a little bit. And I think, maybe we can try going with that. We'll see what that looks like. Let's go back. Yeah, that helped a little bit. I think I'm gonna do the same thing for Base 4. Just go to soft clamp, and that'll get rid of some of those really harsh highlights. All right, let's see what that's looking like. I think that's looking pretty good. Okay, so in our original example, we have obviously some strokes on here, a lot of glow and things like that. We'll get to that in a second. Let's go ahead and do these strokes right now. So let's go back to our Rise Up composition, and I just want to duplicate both of these text layers, so make sure they're both selected, and then do Command D to duplicate those both. I'm going to put them right at the very top and turn them on. Okay, so obviously we don't want this fill color, and so you could go over to the character panel and do a white outline. The problem is it's going to align that outline to the center, and I want it aligned to the outside. So to do that, we need to use a layer style. So what I'm going to do is click on this up one, or you could do Rise, whichever one. I'm going to right click and go down to Layer Styles and then choose Stroke. And you can see it adds a nasty red stroke by default. I'm just going to twirl down stroke, change this to maybe not a pure white, maybe something like that, hit OK. And I think I'm okay with 3 as the size. I might bump it up to 4. Yeah, kind of like that. Okay, now to get rid of this fill, what I can do is go to this blending options, twirl that down, then twirl down advanced blending, and for the fill opacity, just change this all the way to 0. And now we have that white stroke aligned to the outside, and if you want to, you can change the alignment here from outside to inside if you want to, center, but I want it on the outside. All right, so now that I'm happy with that, I'm just gonna copy this layer styles by hitting Command C. And then I'm gonna go to this Rise text layer, and then just do Command V, and it should paste that layer style in. All right, so now we can play this back and see what it looks like. And it's looking pretty cool. And the fractal noise is a kind of processor intensive procedural effect, so it might bog down your system a little bit, and so just be aware of that. All right, let's go ahead and stylize this a bit and we'll finish up here. So originally I had a few effect layers going on here. I had a vibrance, a glow, and a light rays. And so let's go ahead and add our vibrance. So we'll go back to this, do Command-Alt-Y to make a new adjustment layer. I'm just gonna rename this a vibrance. We'll go up to Effect, scroll down to Color Correction, and all the way down to Vibrance. And then I'll just bump up the vibrance and then bump up the saturation, something like that, just to get some nice punchy colors in there. I'm not sure what I did over here, 3961. It's just kind of what you want to experiment with, what you like. I think that'll work pretty well. All right, next we're going to add a glow to this, and we're just going to use the built-in glow effect. So once again, Command-Alt-Y to pull up that adjustment layer. Let's call this glow. And then we'll go up to Effect, scroll down to Stylize, and choose Glow. And here, glow can be a little tricky. It's easy to go way overboard with it. I usually like to make the radius come out quite a bit just to get some nice soft fall off with that glow there. And I think in my previous one, let's see, we did like 275. You can see I did a pretty big radius, and I turned the threshold down quite a bit. What the threshold does is how much the glow is going to be applied to the image based on the luminance value of the image. And so I think something around 50 or so will work pretty well, and then 270, 280, something like that. I might bump up the intensity just a bit. And that's looking pretty good. I like that nice kind of glow going on there. All right, then lastly, what we have is a just light rays effect. And so we're going to add just a radial fast blur to kind of get those light rays going on. So once again, Command-Alt-Y to add that adjustment layer. We'll call this light rays. And then we can go up to Effect, scroll down to Blur and Sharpen, and then go to this CC Radial Fast Blur. You can initially see it's trying to add some light rays to this or something. we need to change the zoom to brightest, and you can see we're starting to get those brights going on. We'll bump up the amount quite a lot, maybe something like 91, 92. And I think you usually need to change the mode to like soft light or overlay. And so we'll just go ahead and do that. Soft light, just to kind of, get that nice fall off with those light rays. And you sometimes just have to mess around with these light rays so they're just not, completely intense. You might even be able to use standard. Actually, I think the standard works pretty well for that. So we'll maybe just bump it up a little bit more. I think over in this one I'd use standard. Okay. So that's looking pretty good. And I think maybe the background's just a bit too dark. So I'm just going to come up to the background and just, pull it up just a tad. So it's not, more black than, colorized. And so I think I kind of like that. Those colors are looking nice. All right, I like it. Okay. So one last thing we're going to do is add just a bit of randomization to our light rays. And so we're going to click on light rays, and we want to add an expression to both the center and the amount. And so I'm going to direct you to a website. If you go to motionscript.com, design-guide/looping-wiggle, you can also type in looping wiggle into Google and it'll point you to this page. There's basically a great wiggle expression here, which is great in that it will actually loop the wiggle. And because usually the wiggle by default isn't loopable, but this actually loops it. And so this is definitely one of those pages you want to bookmark or save this code somewhere. So be sure to visit motionscript.com. It's Dan Ebert's site, and it's really useful for expressions and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to Command-C to copy this. Go back here. I'm going to Alt-click on center. And then in this expression field, I'm just going to paste this in there. Okay, so there's a few different parameters you can mess around with. The frequency is basically how often it applies this effect. I probably want this to be something like 0.6 or so. That's just because I've experimented with it. Amplitude is going to be how much it will randomize the property that you have selected. And this is going to be contextual based on the property. And so right now an amplitude of 110 means for the X and Y position, it's going to adjust it plus or minus that amount randomly. So I might just bump this up to like 410. And then loop time is basically how long you want the loop, effect to, be applied to. And so since our composition is 10 seconds long, I want to make sure this is 10 because this is measured in seconds. Okay, so now you can see it's actually kind of subtle, but the light rays are actually moving around a bit just because that center position is moving around relative to the text and to what it's affecting. And so I'm just going to come to the end, play this, and make sure that we have a loop going on. It looks like we do. Nice and seamless, and so it's pretty easy to pull that off. I'm just going to copy this with Command-C, and then for amount, I'm going to Alt-click, paste that in there. And for this one, I think the frequency, I want it to be like 0.2. The amplitude, I definitely want to be quite a lot less. I might do something like 15, because I don't want the amount to be very much. And since it can only go from like 0 to 100, I want it to be a pretty subtle effect. And I want the loop time to be 10, and so there you go. And so now our light rays will not only kind of move around randomly, but they'll also increase and decrease in intensity over that time randomly. But the best part is the whole thing will loop. And so let's just make sure it loops real quick. It loops. And so everything's looking great. And yeah, we pretty much have our effect all done here. And so you can see it's pretty easy to create this fun effect. And, I kind of like how in this one, I got some really solid, places like this. And you can see in this one, that doesn't happen as often. So the great thing about this project is that we've used the pre-comps and everything is non-destructive and procedural. So I can just go into here and, to fix that, maybe I just need to make the width a lot more. Maybe I can pull this over just to make sure I'm getting, some of those big blotches in there. And so now I can go back and you can see I'm getting that, big blotchy kind of effect in there at some points. And I might do the same thing with the other one. Just go into the fractal just increase the width of the scale, and maybe just find another place like that, and I can go back to my original composition. I'm getting exactly what I want, and so you can see we got some really fun effects going on here, and yeah, it's pretty easy to pull off and to modify to your heart's content. We could even turn off these outer strokes if we want to, and have it just reveal it like that. And so that could be kind of interesting too. I kind of like it with the strokes though. So anyway, that's basically it. It's pretty easy to create really creative typography inside of After Effects with no third-party plugins. And so be sure to check out this technique and see what you can come up with. As you can see, you can do all kinds of stuff. If you want to ever change up what's actually in these showing up inside of these text things, you can just go into the base pre-comps, change up whatever's in there. I could throw an image in there. I could throw a different motion background, whatever I want to. And so it's really extensible, really robust. And so be sure to check it out, have some fun, create some awesome typography, and I'll talk to you later.